Daniel, you can start.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see many of you here today. Thank you very much for joining us on this webinar on quality early childhood education. Many of you know me, but in case not, my name is Daniel Hernandez Torrano, and I'm a professor of educational psychology at the Graduate School of Education at Nazarbayev University. I've been living in Kazakhstan quite a few years, almost 12. And one of the things I've noted that might be common in other countries as well is that a lot of the discussion around education often focuses on secondary and higher education. And well, you might agree with me that these are critical areas. I'm sure you also agree that early childhood is equally important and deserves equal, if not more, attention. This is because the early years are a time of rapid growth and development, shaping what children learn, but also how they grow socially, emotionally, and physically. Kazakhstan has made a great effort and paid significant attention to increasing early childhood education access and access to services, ensuring that more and more children can benefit from these important opportunities. In recent years, the focus has moved a bit more towards improving the quality of these services, and this is where our project comes in. This webinar is part of a broader research project where I serve as PI, and I have the pleasure of working with some colleagues that are here today in the meeting: Laura, Aida, Anara, Manat. The project is called Nurturing Young Minds: The Role of Positive Early Childhood Experiences in Promoting the Health and Well-being of Young Children in Kazakhstan. The project is hosted at the Graduate School of Education at Nazarbayev University and is funded by the Central Asian Research Center for Educational Innovation and Transformation, CARSIT. As part of this project, we focus on understanding how early childhood education, particularly kindergartens, can support the overall well-being of children. While much attention is given to academic preparation in kindergartens, we believe that it is equally important to explore how early childhood can enhance children's health, happiness, and holistic development. I want to take a moment to thank you all here in the audience, from representatives from the Department of Early Childhood Education in the Ministry to the National Institute of Early Childhood Education, UNICEF, other organizations also that are here today representing national experts in early childhood education, and especially the leaders and staff members of the kindergartens we visited across the country to collect our data. Your contribution, collaboration, advice, and support have been very, very invaluable to the progress and success of this project so far. Now, let me move. I'm admitting a few other participants that are joining now. Let me talk about what we are going to do today. We are privileged to have two renowned experts with us today, Professor Patricia Eady and Dr. Penny Levikis from the Research in Effective Education in Early Childhood, REACH Hub, at the Faculty of Education at the University of Melbourne. As international partners in our project, their expertise helps us understand on what makes early childhood education truly effective and impactful. Now, before we give the floor to Professors Trisha and Penny, we like to have, and we are delighted to introduce Mrs. Gulnara Isakanokova, is a Deputy Director of the Department of Preschool Education at the Ministry of Enlightenment of the Republic of Kazakhstan. So we are very privileged to have her today in the audience. She will provide a very brief opening remarks to set the tone for today's discussion. So thank you, Mrs. Gulnara Isakanokova, for being with us today. The floor is yours. So, Mrs. Gulnara, thank you so much.
Кайрутан, доброе утро, уважаемые коллеги, уважаемые участники вебинара.
Смотрю в экран и вижу знакомые лица. Это действительно стейкхолдеры образования. Я хотела бы в первую очередь, конечно, поблагодарить Назарбаев университет в лице Патрисии Иди, Даниэля, Эрнандеса Тарана, поблагодарить за проводимую работу, за приглашение в участие в данном вебинаре. Хотелось бы отметить, что государственная политика в сфере дошкольного образования направлена на обеспечение доступности и равных стартовых возможностей для всех детей в получении качественного воспитания и обучения. Государством принимаются меры по улучшению инфраструктуры, увеличению сети дошкольных организаций, в том числе частных дошкольных организаций. Предусмотрено размещение государственного образовательного заказа на дошкольное воспитание и обучение. Но в настоящее время особое внимание государство уделяет качеству образования. Проведены исследования, обновлено содержание дошкольного воспитания и обучения, разработаны критерии оценки качества. Сегодня проводится большая работа по определению опорных, магнитных и целевых дошкольных организаций. И, соответственно, разрабатывается механизм перехода от слабых дошкольных организаций к сильным, или мы говорим сейчас лучшим. В республике сегодня функционирует 180 центров компетенций. Центры компетенций – это наши лучшие дошкольные организации, которые транслируют свой передовой педагогический опыт, свои лучшие практики. Очень большое внимание сегодня уделяется и детям, которые не посещают дошкольные организации. Уже более 4000 консультационных пунктов функционирует в республике. Консультационные пункты создаются на базе дошкольных организаций, которые уже имеют все ресурсы, как материальные, так и педагогические ресурсы. Данные консультационные пункты проводится работа по психолого-педагогическому сопровождению родителей детей, не охваченных дошкольным воспитанием и обучением. Проводятся консультации для родителей с целью просвещения их в вопросах ухода, развития с самого раннего детства детей, которые воспитываются в семье. На сегодняшний день я очень рада, министерство поддерживает исследования, которые проводятся по раннему развитию детей. И в конце своего выступления хочу поблагодарить всех участников исследований. Мы все прекрасно понимаем, что данные исследования очень нужны, и мы будем ждать результатов. Благодарим действительно за большую проводимую работу всех участников. Желаем удачи и успехов.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Iskakova, for these opening remarks. We really appreciate we know you are a very busy person and have a lot of work in your department, so we appreciate you being here. We invite you and encourage you to stay over the next 50 minutes that the webinar is going to be hosted. And at the end, we are going to have a Q&A session. Now we are going to give the floor to our guests, professors, and then we will have a Q&A session in which you can ask questions to both professors and maybe initiate a brief discussion around these topics. So because the time is limited, I just want to do two things. One is to remind participants, especially those that joined a bit later, that we are offering this webinar in 3 languages, English, Russian, and Kazakh, and you can actually search for the icon of languages and interpretation to choose the language of your preference, so you can follow the webinar much better. And the second thing is, without further delay, just to introduce our speakers, Professor Patricia Eadie and Dr. Penny Levikis. They are, as I mentioned earlier, members of the team. They are the international collaborators at the University of Melbourne, and we have been privileged to have their expertise guiding us through the intricacies of early childhood education. They have been working on these topics for many, many years, and they bring the experience of another country. Australia, with early childhood education, is considered for many a model in different ways of how early childhood education should look like. So, Professors Eadie and Levikis, the floor is yours. You can share your screens, and then whenever you are ready, you can start with your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniel. And I will share my screen. I will do that now. And hopefully those slides are now visible for you.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, I just need to come back here. So what I'd like to do to start is just to thank Daniel and the team for the opportunity to speak with you today. We've, over a number of years now, thought quite deeply about what does make for high quality programs in early childhood education. And I think there's always a lot to learn from each other as we think about these areas. So today's presentation is based around some of the thinking we have done in trying to bring different aspects of quality together, and we'll try to bring it all together towards the end. I do want to start. Just need to find the right buttons. This is going to be, there we go. And you may or may not know, but as in Australia, it's a really important part of our presentations to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country on which we are currently located. And I wanted to do that today as well in speaking to you. And so as a member of the University of Melbourne community, I do want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded land on which Penny and I are on today. We pay our respects to elders past and present and acknowledge their enduring cultural practices and the contribution by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to the education of young children over thousands of years. This is the Birrarung, or the Yarra River, which is on Wurundjeri country, and it runs through the centre of Melbourne. So let me start, I guess, at a place where I think we are probably in agreement that for a number of decades now, the evidence base has grown substantially around the importance of early childhood programs in making a difference to young children's development. We know they make a difference, but we also know we can do better. And this particular graph comes from a document from the Centre on the Developing Child at Harvard University. And what it shows us is that for many of the programs since the 1960s, all of those small bubbles, whether they're blue or orange, above that dotted line are showing positive impacts for young children in early childhood programs. The further above the line they are, the more impactful the programs have been. And we know from quite small studies, which is the size of the circle in this graph, the smaller studies are the smallest circles, that we can make a significant difference to young children's development. In some ways, the challenge that we're facing and we think about here in Australia and internationally is how we take these programs to scale, to be able to work with departments or ministries of education to think about policy and implementation that ensures that all children get access to these programs. And one of the key features of all of these programs that make a difference is the high quality in the programs themselves. And we're going to spend a bit of time today with you trying to unpack what quality actually means. What are the features of quality? But one of the really important pieces of information is that quality and the features of quality are not silos. They're not independent of each other. Quality and quality features rely on the presence of other features in order to really build the momentum for effectiveness for young children's learning. And so for quite a while now, there have been a number of different organisations and a number of different researchers, thinkers in early childhood who have tried to come up with frameworks that explain quality programs. So this diagram is from the OECD, one of their Starting Strong reports. And the features that they've pulled out here include, as you can see on the screen, the workforce and workforce development, the importance of curriculum and pedagogy, which was mentioned in the introductory remarks. And then there are quality standards, families and community, and the importance of monitoring and data. Some of the other models that have been used speak to features such as structure and process. Structure is about where programs are, what the facilities and resources are like, who is teaching the children. And the process is how that teaching occurs. It's the importance of thinking about the things we do and say and interact with young children. But what we know is that both structure and process are important for children's outcomes and learning and development. Some of the work that's been done here in Australia has actually shifted us to think about the sorts of other features of quality that are really important. So beyond the structural and the process quality, there has been discussion around system level quality. So the sorts of investment and funding, the regulatory standards that the system, the department provides, as well as the structural and process quality features. And so what we'd like to do now is actually spend just a brief amount of time pulling these three domains of quality apart and talking about them, and actually speaking to the evidence around the importance of these particular features to influence the quality of programs that we provide to young children. And this was part of some work that Penny and myself and other members of our team did in scoping the literature and the work that had been done both by departments of education and by academics. So I'm going to hand over to Penny now, and she's going to just speak through some of the evidence that we found in this work.
Thanks, Tricia. What this figure here is showing, this is from, as Tricia mentioned, some work we did where we were looking at the domains of quality. So what Tricia just pointed out there in terms of process quality, structural quality, and systems. And we wanted to map the extent and the consistency of the literature around these three domains. Because the reason for doing this is to understand how to drive quality improvement. It really relies on having clear, consistent evidence around these domains. So that's why we're doing this mapping exercise. So what this shows here, and this is from our scoping review, so this is showing the consistency of evidence for different elements of those three, across those three domains. So, and what we found is, and just to explain these bubbles, the larger the size of the bubble, that's the number of papers that we found for this particular evidence. So, and along the bottom, it's got the consistency level. So where 1 is where there's very little consistency in terms of the evidence for these particular elements of these quality domains, where 3 is where you're getting more consistency in terms of the evidence for these domains. And so what we found was that and you can see on the right-hand side there, where there are the 4 bubbles with that big blue one at the top. We found that these were highly consistent. So these were learning environments, so which we would consider to be a structural domain, and professional development and support, which is also structural. And then we also found that programs, interventions and curricula, as well as pedagogy, which we consider to be process quality, there's also high levels of consistency in terms of the evidence supporting those. In the middle there, that yellow bubble is in relation to ratios and group size. The yellow bubble is focused on interactions and parent and community engagement, which are also process quality. And so these were moderate, the evidence supporting these, and then down that low end, with a consistency level of 1, this is the findings in relation to ratio and group size. So these are structural and qualifications and pre-service training. So again, structural quality, and the evidence is really inconsistent around these components of structural quality. So, and in terms of the system quality, we were unable to find, it's a really heterogeneous topic, so we were unable to include literature that was focused on system quality. So Tricia, if you go to the next slide, please. And I'll just go into a bit more detail about what each of these domains of quality are. So in terms of system quality, what do we mean by that? So it refers to the governance and regulatory standards and the investment in services and programs. System quality is approaches to continuous improvement in all domains of quality. Approaches to continuous improvement in all domains of quality, including system quality, have been applied worldwide. And changes to system quality are things, for example, like funding allocations. So in Australia, via state, federal governments, improvements to national policies and regulatory or evaluation frameworks. Next slide, please. And in terms of what's known about system quality, so we know that early childhood education systems need to be flexible and allow us to adjust, for example, the minimum hours of universally provided 3- and 4-year-old preschool or kindergarten, giving us capacity to provide additional hours based on an individual child's needs. And this process is often referred to as proportionate universalism, whereby the program or intervention is available to the whole population, but it can be tailored to be to deliver more intensive intervention to those who need it. System quality improvements have been demonstrated through funding. So, for example, in New Zealand, funding is provided to services to opt in, and they can access higher funding rates for paying certified teachers at or above certain minimum salaries. Quality rating and improvement systems have been shown to help services improve quality through assessment, identifying areas for improvement, and then planning for future improvement. And these are associated with higher process quality. And rating and accreditation processes have been demonstrated to lack the sensitivity to differentiate between fine-grained levels of quality, such as evidence-based teaching strategies, which is where other measures of quality and the other domains, such as process quality, are really important when we're thinking about quality overall. And system quality of the universal provision of 2 years of early childhood education and care prior to formal schooling has been shown to benefit children's learning. And for children experiencing vulnerability, studies have found that more than 1 year of preschool has led to larger gains in their learning. Next one, please, Tricia. In terms of structural quality, so we know that when it comes to providing high quality early learning experiences, that structural quality plays a really vital role, and this encompasses several key elements that can create the foundation for a strong early childhood program. So first, we know that adult-child ratios and group sizes are important, but as I mentioned in our literature scoping review, we did find the evidence for this inconsistent. One of the reasons that adult-child ratios and group sizes are important is that having appropriate ratios with smaller group size can allow educators to give children the individualised attention that they need. Qualifications and pre-service training of our workforce is really important. So highly trained qualified teachers can bring a depth of knowledge to really nurture children's growth and development effectively. Structural quality also involves professional learning and support provided to educators and teachers, such as coaching opportunities to continuously enhance their skills. And learning environments are a major component of structural quality, so ensuring that physical spaces, materials, and cultural contexts are really engaging, safe, and stimulating for children's development. And finally, family and community involvement is really critical. So actively involving parents, caregivers, local communities can create collaborative partnerships that really benefit the holistic wellbeing and development of the child. Next one, please. Thank you. So in terms of what we know about structural quality, while structural elements such as staff-child ratios, learning environments, workforce qualifications are necessary foundations, structural quality alone is not sufficient for the provision of high-quality programs. So this goes back to Tricia's introduction around quality domains not operating in silos. And this slide just gives some examples of how the components of structural qualities are linked to other quality domains. So, for example, in the Starting Strong report from the OECD in 2017, it was stated it's not only the qualifications of teachers and educators that affect child outcomes, it's the ability of staff members to create a better pedagogic environment that makes a real difference. Another example is in Ontario, Canada. They've introduced full-day kindergarten programs since 2010 and have demonstrated improvements to children's early literacy, numeracy and self-regulation skills compared to half-day kindergarten, but noting that the programs need process quality elements. So, for example, the educator-child interactions, the curriculum and the pedagogies are needed to be really beneficial. So it's not just about giving more, but it's about giving more where you have those really high quality educator-child interactions. And another example is the link between lower staff-child ratios, which is an element of structural quality, is impacting overall quality because it provides those opportunities for more scaffolding and sustained teacher-child interactions. So again, it's by enhancing that structural quality, you're able to then have that greater, those opportunities for high process quality. And professional development that targets enhancing teacher-child interactions rather than just structural features can lead to higher quality. Next, please, Tricia. And so that leads us to process quality, which, you know, I would say I think is the heart of quality early learning experiences. So it refers to those rich dynamic interactions and those shared experiences that take place between educators, teachers and children every day. And process quality encompasses the learning programs, curricula, teaching strategies that are implemented in the early learning context. So it's not just about, for example, the materials that are being used, but it's how the teacher uses those to intentionally support children's wellbeing, learning and development. Process quality highlights the importance of pedagogy, those instructional techniques that educators use like questioning, modelling and scaffolding to promote children's deeper thinking and learning. It's the warm responsiveness of a teacher during shared book reading, for example, or open-ended explorations that teachers facilitate during art experiences. So you could say that process quality is truly where the magic happens. And it's those really meaningful teacher-child interactions that spark curiosity and build essential skills that we know all children deserve. And so finally, in terms of what's known about process quality, prioritising process quality ensures young children have a really engaging, nurturing experience, and this lays the foundation for their future growth and achievement. And research shows that it's the quality of teacher-child interactions that is the greatest predictor of enhancing young children's language, cognitive skills and overall thinking. And it's through these sustained back and forth exchanges and reciprocal engagement that educators and teachers can most effectively foster children's communication skills and their understanding of concepts, for example. And more than curricular materials or other program features, these daily interactions between children, their teachers and peers can really shape what they learn and how they feel about the learning process itself. Thanks, Tricia.
Thanks, Penny. So I hope, sorry, I'm just getting the slides organised. I think what we'd really, I guess, like to leave you with today is a way of drawing this together, which is what I'm going to do now. But it really is taking the aspects of the system, the structural and the process quality, and understanding how they can be brought together and what levers we have to really influence them in terms of providing these quality programs for young children. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of these levers that we have. And the first is very much system level, which is thinking about national quality standards and regulatory frameworks. And while Australia is very proud of the work we've done over the last decade and a half, it has only been in that last decade that we've really been able to roll out national quality standards and regulatory frameworks that are across the whole country, because we have a number of states and often our states like to do their own thing, but this has been a process of actually bringing everybody together to do this. So the regulations provide for child safety, for the types of staff-child ratios and overall group sizes in kindergarten programs. And the national quality standards are ways for us to accredit early childhood services. And I just wanted to show you, so The Australian Children's Education and Care Quality Authority was established just over 10 years ago, and it has responsibility for the oversight of this and of the oversight of the standards, and also of providing a quality rating for services every 3 years. And so this just gives you a sense of the way the quality standards cover all different aspects of quality that we've been talking about. So educational programs and practice is the process quality that Penny was just talking about, which is so important. Children's health and safety is much more in the realm of a regulatory framework. The physical environment, the staffing arrangements are much more structural pieces. And then we have these important relationships with children and collaborations with family and community. But services are assessed and then they're given a rating according to how they are assessed in each of these quality standard areas. And you can see there on the right-hand side of the slide that you go from usually working towards, although some services are assessed as needing significant improvement, but you go from working towards to meeting to exceeding. And all of this information and services ratings are publicly available. So if parents are wanting to think about quality in terms of where they would use what programs or what services they might get their children to attend, they can find this information. It's readily available. Importantly, one of the really significant levers in terms of quality is the investment that the state makes into the early child education and care workforce. In Victoria, the state that the University of Melbourne is situated in and much of our work happens in, we've been very much involved in thinking about what the investment in the early childhood workforce needs to be. So that's around professional learning that really supports that process quality, that really supports that continuous quality improvement in thinking about programs. But there is also investment in pre-service teacher education, accrediting courses, and what's becoming of more interest to the sector and service providers are micro-credentials. So really small pieces of learning that are credentialed by a university or an education provider. So, for example, we have a set of micro-credentials around leading learning in early childhood, and one of those small pieces focuses on collaborative relationships. But they're very small, bite-sized pieces of learning, but really important ways to move to provide professional learning. One of the things that Australia did quite early on in this journey that we've been on is establish an educational leader role. And that person really takes a role in the service to provide leadership around pedagogy, around the program, and really is given time to be able to lead the quality improvement work that a service wants to undertake. In Australia, a significant issue for us has been being able to provide culturally safe and responsive programs for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and families. And one of the important investments that Australia has made in order to achieve this is thinking about how we bring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people into the profession of early childhood education. The other lever we have, or the levers we have, is thinking about what are the features that are really critical to quality in early childhood programs. And I've just put a few of them up here to talk about briefly. The first one is that it's really important to keep our eye on what's developmentally appropriate and that our programs are being delivered in a play-based program. There is a lot of discussion around the world about whether or not we're pushing down school education into early childhood services. And one of the ways we can counter that, if there is that type of push, is to think about the age of these children, what's developmentally appropriate, and that their learning is going to be rich if we're providing that in play-based programs. Children's work is play, and so if we can provide their programs in that environment, we maximise their learning. There's a real importance to focusing with teachers on their observation and planning, not just observation of individual children, planning of programs, and thinking about assessment for learning. So this is about formative assessment. It's about our observations. It's about how well we know the children we're working with in order to understand where they are on a learning progression and what their next steps are going to be, so that we can plan to scaffold those next steps through the next point here, which is intentional teaching strategies. We can be play-based and we can let children lead their play, but that doesn't mean we can't also be purposeful and planned in the learning goals we've identified for children. And so we spend a lot of time working with both our pre-service teachers and teachers who are in services, thinking about the intentionality of their learning goals and how they're being purposeful and planning their learning goals. And as Penny mentioned, interactions that are sustained and shared, that are contingent with young children, are at the heart and the core of quality programs for children. One of the things that we do talk about is this idea about instructional support. So again, we're being play-based, we're being intentional, but we're thinking about what are the strategies we can use, the sorts of questions we can ask that really support the instruction that we're providing for young children. I just only have a couple of slides left. I just wanted to talk briefly to developmentally appropriate practice, because it is strengths-based, it's play-based, and it's children engaged in learning. And when we think about developmentally appropriate programs, there are certain things that are common to all learning in terms of whether the specific social, cultural, linguistic, the historical context of the community you're working in, they're common features. But understanding that children come with characteristics and experiences that are unique to them and their family and their community. And making sure that we deeply understand the context in which we're working, both the social and cultural contexts. This is a diagram from our early years learning framework for Australia, which just talks to that planning cycle I was mentioning. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail with this today, but to say that we really encourage teachers in their planning and their programs to think about each of these elements of the planning cycle, to be observing and collecting information from the children, to analyse and interpret what they've observed in terms of learning progressions and development of young children, to then plan and design a program that actually provides those scaffolds for young children. We enact that through being intentional in our teaching, and then we evaluate the learning and teaching that has gone on, and that cycle then becomes continuous. finally, I'm not sure if intentional teaching is something that is discussed. It's probably called something different, but some of the intents behind it may be quite familiar to you on the call today. So I've just put a few features of intentional teaching onto this slide. So it is child-focused. We have high expectations for each child, and we respect children's agency and their place in their learning and driving their learning. But equally, we can be planned and responsive to young children. We recognise that learning occurs in really social contexts for young children. So we think about the classroom, we think about the space and the learning experiences that are provided. We think about the relationships we have with children as well as the resources that we have. And most importantly, we think about the communication and the interactions that we're having with young children. So finally, I just wanted to show you this particular diagram. This is something that we developed last year in response to an inquiry that was happening within the Australian context around quality. And it kind of features the child at the centre of what we do and the child's learning and development at the centre. But thinking about the learning environments, which is the structural quality that we've been speaking about, the responsive programs, being culturally and contextually responsive, being inclusive, and thinking about that in terms of the programs that we're providing, which is the process quality, thinking about the professional development and the support that we provide to teachers and educators in order to deliver these programs, which again is a structural piece of the quality. And then thinking about our pedagogy, thinking about that being play-based and intentional, which is very much the focus of the process quality. So that these two interact continually. Some of the system level quality parameters are often when we're talking to teachers or directors of services, they feel less in control of some of the system level quality features. But when we think about the structural and the process quality features, we can be reflecting and thinking deeply about those particular aspects of quality. So thank you. And yes, Daniel, very happy to have questions or discussion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Tricia and Penny, for this presentation, and also thank you for meeting the time requirements. So we have a little time at the end of the session for some questions and answers. So I am going to open the floor. Maybe you can raise the hand. You can do that in Zoom, and then maybe by order we can take questions. Just want to ask those asking questions if you can remain in the channel, the language that you have chosen, or that you speak in the language that of the channel you have chosen. So those who speak other languages can get the translation from these languages. So maybe a few seconds for raising hands.
Hello. Oh, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Tatiana.
No, I think someone says hello but didn't raise the hand. Maybe it was a
Yeah.
matter of functionalities. Please, over to the person who says hi. I will be
Sorry, I just
second.
couldn't find the button of the raising
Right.
hand.
So thank you so much, Tatiana. Let's give the floor to Aijan, and then Tatiana, and then Sogdiana. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Tricia, and thank you. I can't find Penny. Yeah, for your presentation. It was great. So I'm a PhD candidate at Nazarbayev University, and my research interest is related to the quality of early childhood education. So I have two questions. So who defines what the quality means? And how can we consider the voices of children, teachers and parents, and the heads of kindergartens, yeah, so that it's not top to down, but from bottom to top. And the second question is, how do you integrate the culture, the context of local indigenous people in the curriculum, in pedagogy, in the process? Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah, thank you for those questions. And I think I didn't start with this statement, but I often do. I mean, quality is defined differently by different scholars. And in the history of early childhood education and care, quality as a construct has been contested by many people. So I think acknowledging that there is a lot of debate and discussion about definitions of quality. So I completely understand that part of the question. As part of the early childhood education and care reforms and bringing in, I guess, processes and frameworks within Australia, the discussion has not been exclusively, but has been very much built around these ideas of structural and process quality. But appreciate that other scholars will have very different perspectives on that. And that's a lively debate in the field. I think what we have done and I'll talk to the Australian system, is our both our national quality standards and the early years learning framework really acknowledge the important place of children's agency and of children's voice and of partnerships and really strong partnerships with families. So at the service level, you will see programs that are very much responding to the community within which they're placed. I should also add that our early years learning framework actually has a preface to its title, which is belonging, being, and becoming. And those three words are very much intentionally put there to acknowledge the place of the child in that framework. Children need to be themselves, they need to be being, they need to belong in the community in which they're participating, and we want them to become, we want them to be developing at the same time. The question about our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families is a really important one, and I think I would have to say that we are still learning a lot from those communities about how to deliver culturally safe and culturally responsive programs. Our Commonwealth Government now provides funding for Aboriginal controlled services. So that means that they are based in the community and are controlled by the community. And that's why there has been a real importance put to actually building the teacher workforce in those communities as well. Some of our own work that we have done in our research centre in the Northern Territory of Australia with remote Aboriginal communities has involved significant time in those communities and working with them and talking to them about the knowledges that they prioritise for their children. And the program develops once we've established what the community sees as the priorities and the important cultural knowledge that needs to be at the centre of the program. So I hope that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Yes,
Aijan. Thank you, Trisha. Yes, Tatiana, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, and obviously quite important topic to discuss today, because obviously I have a lot of common things to cover and more to ask you, but because of time I don't want to undermine the presence of other participants and their willingness to ask more questions. First of all, I just wanted to get your sense of how do we split between education and care, because obviously that is a very important topic, because we put here both early childhood education and care, and how this is split between service provision. That is critical, and get some sense from the age or approaches we want to tailor with, but that creates a little bit of a burden and unclarity in the way how roles are defined, but also adding on more and more on teachers. So that's where I wanted to get more sense. But the other thing is just commentary in relations to our approach as well, where we try to test our indicators for quality assurance in Kazakhstan, and maybe for students who are still reviewing this topic would be important to have a look of what Kazakhstan already did, but there are issues remaining with social emotional learning, inclusive approaches in Kazakhstan, and also how to make sure that there is a small size groups, because of course our groups are still overloaded, and we need to properly balance the ratio. Thank you very much.
There's a lot there, and Penny may be interested in responding to some of the social emotional learning piece, because that's something that she's done a lot of thinking about. I think, interestingly, some of the work we do with in-service teachers, so teachers who are in programs, is not thinking about completely reducing the group size, but how they structure their programs so they can have small group opportunities to work with children, so that it's not that the overall program size in terms of children stays the same, but the structure of the program enables individual adults to have small group interactions with children, where we know the learning and the instructional support can be deeper. I think separating education and care is quite fraught. I think for us, we see care as something that occurs all the time, that children are with us, that it is part of what parents entrust to us when children are in programs, whether they be what we would call in Australia long daycare programs, where parents are using the service in order to work, so the children are there for quite long hours. But we also have kindergarten programs that would just operate, say, between, like a school day, for example, from 9 till 3. And both of those programs and all of the teachers in those programs care for those children. So I think for us, it's almost like care is a given. Care is the relationships we have. It's the emotional climate we create in our rooms. And then we want to think about what the learning is, what the educational piece is. I think it's a really interesting conversation that I think could go on for a lot longer, Tatiana, than we have. But it's a really important distinction, and I think sometimes the care gets prioritised. Our government dialogue is often about providing childcare in order for parents to return to work, and particularly for workforce participation for women. And we're often working against that to say, yes, it is childcare and it's education at the same time. Penny, was there anything you wanted to add?
I don't think so, unless there's anything, and sorry, because now I've forgotten what the
It was
point
about
around
social
emotional.
emotional. It was focusing on social emotional learning.
Yeah.
I think was the question, just which I guess we are. I think there's a lot of work happening in that space.
Yeah, there is both. I think both nationally and internationally. Yeah, social emotional learning and child mental health is sort of a really big issue. I think particularly coming off the back of COVID as well. So
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jan. Penny, no worries. We have a couple of questions, and there is one in the chat. So I think in my list, the next person asking question was Sogdiana Chukurova. So Sogdiana, if you like to ask your question.
Yes, hi, thank you for the presentation. I'm aware of the time, so I'll have just one question. I know that you are in the process of doing research in Kazakhstan, so I'm just wondering how comparable is like all types of qualities, if you like, between Australia and Kazakhstan, because you mentioned system quality, and we realize that there's so much still to do in system quality and in structural and processual quality in Kazakhstan. So I'm just wondering how can you even compare like the context that you have in Australia to what we have in Kazakhstan? Do you see any similarities? I know that some of the things are universal and they can be adapted to any country, like, the process quality and structure quality. But in terms of system quality, we still have a lot of work to do. And can you comment on this? Anything on this?
I'm wondering if Daniel might be better placed to comment on this. I mean, we've started having conversations together about that. I think it's something we're both very interested in, isn't it, Daniel?
Yeah, well, perhaps to mention two things. One that might be a bit different, and one might be very similar. The project we are working on, most of the discussions we are having are specifically about how early childhood can promote health and well-being. So even though there are other things we could discuss, but one of the things that was striking in the last meeting we had when we were in Australia was we collected some data, and I think Gauhar Kiikova is also around using the Eker's scale. So I think it was quite shocking to see in the different kindergartens we visited how low the scores were in most of them. There were a couple of exceptions with scores that were very high or at least average, but most of them they were low. So by using this tool, at least based on the things that are assessed by this tool, the quality of the kindergartens we visited that were not randomly selected, but I think more or less representative of kindergartens in Kazakhstan, the quality could be improved in many areas. That was surprising, I think, for our colleagues in Australia. Number two, the things that is very similar, and maybe Penny like to say something about that, specifically when we look at what makes children happy in kindergartens, which is a bit of the bottom line of our study, how kindergartens promote well-being, or in other words, how kids explain what makes them happy in kindergartens. We were surprised about the similarities of the responses from kids in Kazakhstan compared to the kids in Australia. Penny and colleagues, they are doing research on a similar topic on this issue, and we were very surprised about how similar things were between Kazakhstan and Australia about the things that makes kids happy. I don't know if Penny, would you like to add anything about that discussion we had in the last meeting?
Yeah, no, I don't think so, but I mean, I guess that thing of, and I think it comes across in both Daniel too, is just the importance of relationships, the peer relationships and family and the teachers and educators as well. But we are, I mean, I think it would be fantastic because we have discussed actually collaborating together to analyse the data to do a proper comparison, which I think would be fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sogdiana. And now we have Madina to ask perhaps the last question. We are almost 10 minutes beyond the time.
Yeah, I'm aware of the time, Daniel.
Thank you, Madina.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to join this webinar. My name is Madina Tunubayeva. I'm the president of the National Academy of Education under the Ministry of Education, and I'm a PhD graduate of the Graduate School of Education of Nazarbayev University, and Daniel was one of my supervisors at that time. I will not make it as a question. I think probably some thoughts out loud. I'm responsible and working in the sphere of secondary education, and if the indicators that were shown as the indicators of the quality, could they be predictive enough to think that the students will be successful in other levels of education? Because what we now are working on is trying to synchronize the preschool education with the school education, and we're in the process of the review of the curriculum, and we're trying to have that in the mind that the students will come from preschool to the schools and to help them to adapt, and we're thinking about the adaptive programs for students from, but should we have such, and if the things and the framework that you have shown in your practice, in your country, if it is predictive, and should it be, and probably should it be taken into account when we think about the quality on other levels? Probably no answer at the moment, but I was just thinking about that while listening to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Medina, and it's a really important point. And what I would do is just if you can recall that very first slide that I had with the evidence and how there were programs that had had a really important impact on preschool learning. The two of those programs, they were developed and led in the 1960s and 70s. So those children are now adults, and having been followed into adulthood, their educational outcomes, their occupational outcomes, their health are all tracking at a higher than predicted level had they not been a part of those intensive preschool programs. So the continuity of learning, the transitions between preschool to primary school to secondary school are really critical. And what we know is that if we get preschool right, and if we think about some of the things we've been talking about, social emotional learning, children's self-regulation, their kind of skills that are more related to executive function skills, those things make a big difference to their educational outcomes later on. There's also some really interesting data that's mainly out of the United States that speaks to children who attend preschool regularly are much more likely to attend school regularly. And so there's an important feature of getting children into preschools and attending regularly that continues on through their schooling.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are two more questions. One is in the chat, the other one is in the audience. I'm afraid the time it's moving. So maybe, is that okay, Tricia, we take one more question from the chat that was written? Just maybe briefly, because I think it's an overall question. This was Dr. Arstan Satanov is asking for a clarification on the 7 quality areas and the corresponding quality ratings within the national standards in Australia. I think it's more maybe a bit summary or yes, of what these areas are and how they are measured. Yeah.
Yeah. So services receive a visit from the assessors from a CEQA, and they might spend 1 or 2 days there at the service, and they talk to the teachers and the director. They get a lot of information from the service at that time. And on each of those ratings, on each of those standards, a rating is given. And if a service gets, and I would need to go back and double check this, but you need to get a certain number of individual ratings of exceeding in those standards. I think you need at least 4 before you become an exceeding overall service. You can meet the standards if you are not exceeding in any of the standards, but you're assessed as meeting them. So it's a bit complex, Daniel, to go into really quickly, but there is a process of needing to look at each of those 7 standards in order to come to a final rating.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's complex, and perhaps we can discuss that, Arstan, a bit longer. We want to meet with Arstan soon, so we can expand on this. Gauhar said that what she has is not really a question, it's a comment. So Gauhar, I will ask you, maybe you can make it very, very, very quick so we can wrap up the meeting and then close it.
Yes, very quick. Thank you, Daniel. Good morning, dear colleagues. Just a quick comment to what Ms. Madina Tanabaeva asked. I think it's time for us in Kazakhstan, for the universities to step in, because we already have kindergartens who are developing their quality. There are several only for now, but they are working very hard and they are showing great results. And we've seen it when we were collecting our data, because the kindergartens who were doing good professional development, they were much higher on the acre scale than the other ones. So the universities need to step in and start researching what is going on with those kindergartens and how kids from those kindergartens going on to school are doing at school. And another just small comment, we do need to look at our primary school, because what we have right now is not really age developmental appropriate, I would say, as well. So that's just what I wanted to add. Yeah, thank you. And yes, I would also be happy to hear more about this quality rating system that you have. If we maybe have something else to discuss, that would be great.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Gauhar, for making it brief. I'm not afraid, but I'm actually happy that we can wrap up this webinar. I want to thank both Tricia and Penny for making time to present to us. And I apologize, we went a bit over the 1 hour that we promised, but I think it was very fruitful. Must say that this is not going to be the last time, hopefully, that we as a group, we meet. The end is year, so the year is ending, and we plan for next year to have more events of this type in which we discuss maybe the results of our project. We are analyzing the data. By early next year, we will have already a good estimation of what the findings are. So we plan to organize a bigger event, perhaps face-to-face, in which we share these findings, and maybe we can have some kind of roundtable discussion in which all members of the community represented here can contribute. But for today, this is it. We thank all your participation, and again, especially Tricia, Penny, and also Mrs. Iskakova for making this opening speech. Thank you so much. We wish you a good new year that is almost here, and we will come up and follow up with some additional events early next year. Thank you very much. I will stop the recording, and just also to make you aware that this recording will be shared with participants. We will share the recording so you can share with your colleagues, and we will also place it in our website for bigger dissemination. Thank you very much, Tricia, Penny.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your
Thanks
week.
a lot.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Problem better.